that Tim is something else. I'm reminded today of a story. I once got a letter that said, I want to be really close to you. I want to take you to bed. I want to make you sweat. I want to make you cry out. Signed, the flu. And I'm a little under the weather right now, So today we're talking about volunteerism. We're talking about prayer and Martin Luther King, which all seem to go together because he was a man of religion, man of faith, also a man who gave his life, literally, both during the living and the dying. He gave his life for a cause greater than himself, a cause to help other people to see themselves, really, as we advocate here every week, that you see yourself as a child of God and not as the circumstances of your life. It's essentially his message. And if you will do that and see yourself that way, then you will treat others in the same way. Or if you will see others in that way, you'll treat yourself in the same way. And this reciprocity is part of this book study that we're going to do as well, called The Power of Eight. In The Power of Eight, if you gather a group of people, roughly 8, 6, 12, something like that, you gather a group of 8 people together, and they pray for somebody in that group. So generally the way the author, Lynn McTaggart, has done it is that she would set up, so one person is the designated receiver of the prayers, and the rest are praying for them. And they might put their hands on the person, but they care, they intend it, they mean it when they want them to get their outcome. As they pray in this altruistic way, and all 8 minds are locked in on the same idea, the results she has, described in her book, The Power of Eight, are amazing. People get up and walk who've been using their canes. People have reduction in liver disease, etc. Many amazing things. When the people in the circle do that prayer for the other person with sincerity, with the intent that it happened, there is an interesting thing that happens. The same thing happens in their life. So if you're praying for health for the other person, then your physical world gets better. Your physical health gets better. She calls this the rebound effect. It could be, but no one knows exactly how it works. Except in the same way that speaking, you're the first person to hear it. Right? You're the very first person to hear whatever you're saying. So you're the first person to hear your prayers as well. Your intentions, your heartfelt giving is the very first thing that you'll be affected by that as well. And so the amazing story is that the people who are praying for others actually end up having even greater results than the one who are giving the prayers. And if this group goes on long enough, if there's a harmonizing and coherence inside the group, then the power of it gets better and better. And it doesn't have to be a big group, it could just be 8. It's enough. 8 is enough. I've heard that somewhere. This, I think, points to something really universal. So there's the prayer way of doing this. There's also the volunteering way of doing it. So I was reading about volunteering, and volunteering has a very positive effect on your mental health. So if you were a persistent volunteer, your chances of this happening go up the more you volunteer. And I guess by inverse, if you don't do as much, you have less of this effect, but your mood generally goes up. Statistically, you have a 22% less chance of having depression if you are a pretty consistent volunteer. 22%? That's pretty good. It's probably better than a lot of the drugs out there in their effectiveness, right? This act of doing for others, this altruism is a healing force for the giver. So there are 2 effects, of course. If you're really good at this, you're hopefully having a positive effect on the world, and you have that sense of I'm doing good. But there's something inherent in the way human beings are wired that when they give, they receive. We've heard that somewhere, haven't we? As you give, so you shall receive. As you give, it shall be given back to you, pressed down and running over. That's what this Power of Eight group would say. That's what the studies on volunteerism would say. So we have Martin Luther King Day as a good day to have a volunteer fiesta. Because here's someone who, through his altruism and the altruism of others, invited something great to happen in this country. Now that was 50 years ago he died, at age 39. 39. When I was 39, I was still having a hard time putting my shoes on right. I mean, it's just like impressive, isn't it? That's an amen in our corner, right there. And I think one reason why Martin Luther King was so successful was from the beginning of his time when he thought that self-defense was the way to go, that maybe buying guns was the way to go, he moved toward this idea of nonviolence. Now the interesting thing about nonviolence is that essentially what you try to do with nonviolent action is to call out the best in the other person. And if you're going to be good at nonviolence, you must be really good at managing yourself. You must give love in the face of hate or aggression. You must at least be neutral, and if you're really effective, you will give love in the face of hate and aggression. And in so doing, you will change the heart of the aggressor. At some point, they will see that they can no longer keep this up, that they must come around to a mutual sense of respect and love, and that's the process of nonviolent demonstration. First, you cause them to have to respond, and when they respond, if they respond in anything other than love, it causes them great pain inside because they can see you are doing it better than they are, and they come around to your way. So you become a warrior for peace. You become someone who is taking on the burden of the world, taking on the sins of the world, and giving back love. So it's a very Christian thing to do, a very Buddhist thing to do. It's a very Hindu thing to do. It's a very religious thing to do. It's to take on the sins of the world out of altruism. Now, many of us in this room have had a hard time with the Christian doctrine of that, I being one of them. But if you really think about it, that there's probably some deep truth in that. I take on the sins of the world, and I'll set you free, because I will give, in response to anger and violence, I will give you love. Now, for the person who can do that, imagine how much bigger and stronger you are after having done that. You become not diminished by the abuse. You become strengthened. You become more. As you give, so you become. It's just like as you give your prayers, so you become. As you give your time, so you become. As you transform yourself through healing others, everybody wins. Both you and the other person. Mark Siljander was the person who came and spoke here in August of last year. Or the year before, actually. Sorry. He was a very conservative, Bible-thumping, righteous congressman who thought that Muslims were evil. Until he read the Quran and found that in the Quran there are 1,600 verses that are exactly the same as in the Bible. And those 1,600 verses were enough to convince him that his ideas were wrong, and he began to use his time not to separate, but to build bridges between the Christians and the Muslims. And in so doing, he found himself going to very hostile parts of the world where there were either civil wars or despotic rulers. And he would speak with those rulers and not tell them what they should do, which is usually the American way. Aren't we the most righteous group of people you've ever seen? And I know that Trump said this, but don't we all kind of revel in the idea that we have the biggest button? Don't we think we're something special? I mean, as a culture, we really think we're something special because we have more than others. And then we should be telling people what to do. But that's not what Siljander did. He would go and he would talk to these people and he'd just pray with them. He'd just pray with them. He'd pray with them for their highest. Pray with them that, like a Christian or Muslim, he'd pray with them so that, and what would happen was, he would never ask them to make the change, to either let in UN peacekeepers or to stop the Civil War or to be a better leader. He would just pray with them and open his heart and break bread with them and befriend them. And in befriending them and breaking bread with them and opening his heart and praying for their happiness and their well-being, they began to trust him. And then they would say, "Hey, Mark, what do you think I should do about the Civil War?" He'd say, "How about quitting?" Or how about letting the UN peacekeepers in? And with that, what could not be done with force was done with love. This inversion of the normal way in our society we think is the process of awakening, but it's also this process of healing and loving and becoming the person that you really want to be. But even better, you have a positive effect on the world around you. So it's altruism versus meism that makes you healthy, wealthy, and wise. As you give, so you shall receive. Now, we've talked about this many times around money, that my experience has been, when I have been a tither, I have always felt rich. And when I have been a non-tither, I have always felt poor. And I try to convince people here all the time because it helps my job. Makes it really easy if y'all will do that. But also because it actually tends to work. And I do talk about other things, but so it's not the only thing I talk about. This idea that as you give, it somehow, the universe gives it back to you. And I don't really understand how come. I do know one thing about tithing, that only rich people can give money away. So which side of the fence, or the tracks, you might say, am I on when I'm tithing? When I'm tithing big, I must be rich, right? Some part of me must go that. So that works. Give and you receive. You receive the experience of being rich. I love this line from a movie. So a man is owed somebody $2 million, and he doesn't like this guy, and he doesn't like having to owe him money. So as soon as he possibly can, he writes him a check for $2 million. Even though it endangers his own company, he writes him a check, and the guy says, "You just gave me $2 million. And he goes, "And I feel the richer for it." And that's the way it is. Give, and you will receive the experience that money can't buy. There's stories, much data on this, on how much money you need to be happy. And it's not a little bit, but it's not a whole lot either. You need enough to be able to pay your bills and to move and get along okay in the society. Anything over that amount does not make you happy. And they have done studies on this. Even doubling your income, once you reach that, doesn't make you happy. It might make you happy that day, but it doesn't make you really happy. Long term, you're not happier. There's only one way one way, if you make a lot of money, more than you need, a lot of money, to be happy, and that is to give it away. Anything other than that, it doesn't help. That probably doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help. If you want to be happy for the rest of your life, sorry, Nancy, that wasn't about you. Take it out of your pocket and give it away if you have access. If you have access to that. If you don't, well then, you just have to rely on the regular ways of what giving does. But I think if you take all this together, 22% less depression, your average lifespan, if you're really active in a church like this or any religious, spiritual organization, your average lifespan is statistically goes up 7 years. This experience that they say, if you pray for others, you get this return benefit. Isn't this all like one big mosaic, kind of echoing something Jesus said, it's better to give than receive. Love your neighbor as yourself. Pray for your enemies. Trust that your Father knows you have earthly needs. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. The rest of it will be added to you. Doesn't it all sound very biblical, very scriptural, very mainline? And yet I think in the self-help culture, which many of us have grown out of, the self-help culture has been very much turned on its head from that. It's like, what can I manifest? How can I get a brand new X, Y, or Z? How can I be the shiniest thing on the block? Right? Isn't that, didn't we all come here hoping that would happen to us? In part, that's how I got to where I am. I just wanted to be shinier, happier. Something I wanted to heal what was hurting in me, whatever it is. All that drove me down the spiritual path. But now that we're on the spiritual path, it really flips on its head, and it's just the opposite. Love someone. Pray for someone. Serve someone. Be kind, and you will be experiencing kindness. Give good for bad. All those things. This is like the new math. Right? 5 minus 3 is 8. It's ridiculous. It works. Right? This is where we're going. So Martin Luther King got that really early in his life. Must have. To die so young and to have such a big impact. To give knowing it could be his life too. The song that Tim sang echoes the last speech he made. And in the last speech he said, I may not get there. He wasn't the first person to say that. Certainly wasn't the first martyr to say that. I think it's always made me a little nervous thinking about becoming so good I'd die. So I've avoided it with astutely. I don't think there's any chance of me dying young. But these are what heroes do. This is what the best of us do. They just go for it. Even if it kills them. Right? You just go for it. So if you're sitting in this comfortable chair, and you're thinking, I don't know about giving. You can do better than that. You don't have to die from it, but you could do better than that. And if we all do our little part, or maybe our big part, what would the world look like? In this culture, it is really easy to be self-centered. I'm not sure an easier place than here, but it's really easy here. You know, most people over the age of 50, a significant, maybe not most, but a significant number of people over 50 are suffering from isolation. So it's really easy to be all about yourself. But if you want to be happy, or healthy, or even wealthy, it appears the way to do it is to give some away. Now, you don't have to give so much away that you don't have a life, but there's some wisdom in knowing your boundaries. But Lord have mercy, it is part of the oddball way this universe is worked out. If you will give, you will receive. And if you will withhold, it shall be withheld. Because you're not open. And there's not enough in this world to make you feel full if you won't give it away. So let us pray and move on to doing it. All right, so let's find somebody in your life you know you can pray for, who could use it. And I know you could use it, but we're just going to practice somebody else. So pick somebody that you love, or you would like to love, and give a prayer for them. And if that person you chose was somebody close, choose now someone at a distance, or if it's vice versa, if you chose someone at a distance, choose someone close. Let us pray for them. And now, let's see if we could just open our hearts and radiate love in all directions without concern of where it lands, or if you're able, or if you're willing, or pretty enough, or strong enough, or fast enough. Just love something. Love in all directions without care or concern where it lands. Friend and enemy, lucky and unlucky. Now, if you can, let's see if you can just thank God for your life and all that's in it. and move to a state of gratitude. And as Charlie Brown says, God blesses everyone. Or is it Tiny Tim? And so it is. Just want to say, we have two prayer groups here. We have two prayer groups that pray for people all the time.